Hi, Paula here. On this YouTube channel, I usually talk about things related to being an INFP and also about like writing because I love writing and books and things like that. So today I wanted to talk about some of the difficulties of being an INFP when you are also a person of color. And this is something that I've talked about several times on this channel because it's a really big deal. Um, I am black, or some people might say African American. Um, and with that, just like with any person of color, there comes certain stereotypes where people assume that if you are the skin color that you are, then you have a particular personality. For me, a lot of times because I'm black, people will assume before I even open my mouth or they get to know me, they assume that I am aggressive, that I listen to a certain type of music, just like one type of music, that I only eat certain foods, um, and that I have an affinity for certain foods. Just the list goes on and on. Um, and then when they get to know me, they're a little confused. Like I remember one woman, it was a job that I had, and we were just chatting, and someone else in our group happened to mention, "Oh, Paul is vegan." And the lady was like, she looked me up and down, and she's like, "You're vegan?" And I was like, "Yeah." I was a little embarrassed because I don't know, I was just a little embarrassed. And then she's like, "No, really?" And I'm thinking to myself, why is she so surprised that I'm vegan? Because at the time I was skinny. I'm not skinny anymore, but I was back then. So, like, usually a lot of vegans are pretty fit, you know? So I'm thinking, why is she so surprised? And then I started thinking, it might be because I'm black. And a lot of people assume that black people like fried chicken and all of the meats and hamburgers and everything. But we're not all the same. Just like with quote unquote white people, not all white people are the same. Neither are all black people. Um, and unfortunately, stereotypes are just really, really difficult for people in general to overcome. It's like the media trains us to think a certain way about people who look a certain way. Like I mentioned, white people. Um, some people really assume that all white people listen to Coldplay. Not all white people like Coldplay. Some white people like R&B music more than I do. You know, so it just we have to get to know people as individuals instead of giving into what the media feeds us as stereotypes and assuming that that's accurate. But anyway, because we do have a tendency to do that as human beings, to give into the beliefs associated with stereotypes. That can make it really challenging for dark-skinned, black INFPs and other people of color who are INFPs too. I don't want to disclude, is that a word? Disinclude? I don't want to leave anyone out. But it's just that because I happen to be black, I'm just focusing on that right now. But in any case, my point is that like it can make someone who looks like me, who's dark skinned, and an INFP feel really, really out of place. I think all INFPs, generally speaking, across the board, no matter what their skin color is, what culture they belong to, most of us feel like we don't fit in anyway because we are such dreamers and we are attracted to eccentric things. And a lot of times we're also shy and on the quieter side, even though on the inside we have these big explosive personalities and ideas, we keep it all hidden because we're a little bit shy and reticent. So that's something I think most INFPs can relate to. However, when you add to that the fact that you are part of an ethnicity that people assume are supposed to be loud and aggressive, you're supposed to be a certain way. And then when people get to know you or start to get to know you and they see that you're quiet, you're a little unsure of yourself, you might be easily intimidated. I know I am. Um, and also, a lot of INFPs are also highly sensitive people, HSPs. That's another thing, too. Um, that really tends to confuse people when they get to see that about us and they almost don't know what to do with that. Like I had a job recently that I had to quit because it turned out my boss was actually bullying me. And I assumed that before she met me, she thought that I would be aggressive. And this has happened so many times in the past. Like before I even open my mouth, before I say a word, people just assume that I'm going to be aggressive and angry because I'm an angry black woman, of course. Look at me. And she she actually started to insist that a third person be present with her every time she had an interaction with me because she assumed that I'm an aggressive person. Whereas I'm on the other end of the spectrum where, especially the older I get, I will start crying. I check out and start crying when I feel like someone is aggressive with me. And that started happening in our interactions. I got so frustrated and felt attacked and I didn't feel like I had a voice, so I just would start sobbing uncontrollably. And here she was like labeling me as aggressive when I'm not. But anyway, I think things like that happen a lot to INFPs who are people of color, where it's just assumed you're going to be this tough person, and that's not who we are. We might be tough in other ways. Like when we have a goal that we really want to achieve, we might be really um, what's the word? I guess stubborn about trying to reach that goal. So that's a toughness. That takes a bit of thick skin to just push through until we reach a goal. When we try to stand up for what we believe morally, like if we see someone else being bullied or sexually harassed, a lot of times in INFP, that shy, quiet person will be the one to be like, hey, wait a second, don't do that. We'll stand up because we feel that there's something morally wrong happening. And that's when our tough side comes out. But usually, just with everyday interactions, uh-uh, we're not like that. So, yeah, that can be a little bit weird for INFPs to know how to handle when people just assume we're going to be aggressive and because of the color of our skin. And it also, like for me, also being a highly sensitive person, which as I mentioned before, a lot of INFPs are also that, it makes us feel really sad. It hurts. It hurts to be categorized, to be lumped into a category where we don't belong. There are black people who are aggressive, just like there are white people who are aggressive, and Asian people who are aggressive, and Hispanic people who are aggressive. There's all kinds of aggressive people, but that doesn't necessarily have anything to do with the color of their skin or their culture. When I say culture, I should say ethnicity. It's not always that. A lot of times it has to do with the environment that we live in. Like people from New York City might have to talk a little louder if they live directly in the city, and that may come across as aggressive. Just like there was a study that showed that city birds, like birds in Manhattan, New York, are louder compared to birds in like where I live, Baton Rouge, Louisiana, because they have to be. Like my mother, she's from Manhattan, so she talks loud. And some people might think, oh, that's aggressive. It's not really aggressive. It's just because of the place where people grew up, they had to adapt to that, evolve to fit in there. Um, why did I go down that rabbit hole? But I guess my point is that people's personalities are shaped by like the environment that we live in and by our DNA, which is something we really can't control. That's just our ancestors poured that stuff into us. So, For a highly sensitive person who realizes that about other people, because we are usually very empathetic to people typically, and we try to understand why people act the way they do. That's just natural. We try to figure that out. And when that's not done to us in return, it feels very upsetting. It cuts. It cuts. Like I go back to the interaction with the boss that I had at the job that I had to leave. One of the things that bothered me most about this woman who I was working for is that it wasn't necessarily what she said, even though what she said was horrible. It was the way she said it, which was often yelled or just very aggressive and like angry, like that, like literally just crazy. The way it was delivered, because like an HSP and an INFP will look at the way a person speaks, the way they carry themselves, and then their little brain, our little brains, will try and figure out why are they delivering it that way. And for me, the answer to that question was, even though this woman does not know me from Adam, she does not like me. She is treating me the way a policeman, a racist policeman, would treat a black person who's done nothing wrong. Okay? And that hurt. It made me feel like, okay, my skin color must have something to do with this. It must. Because there was no reason for it. And so it hurt to know that because of the way I look, she's not able to separate stereotypes from who I actually am. A person who tries to give their best work, who works from their heart, who works overtime and often doesn't even put those hours on their timesheet just because they want to do a good job. None of that mattered. All that mattered was that I have dark skin, so I must be a bad person. And so I deserve to be yelled at and treated like a criminal. So, yeah, that all of that hurts. And if you've been in a similar situation where it seemed like someone, especially when they're in a position of authority over you, and they just treat you, they don't even see you. It's like they don't see you. All they see is what you look like. And when you're highly sensitive, ooh, that hurts. It's worse than a punch to the gut. It's like being stabbed. It really is. Um, and it's even hard, I think, for us to wrap our minds around why someone would do that because it's just not the way that we're built, generally speaking. We don't really understand that mindset. So it's just impossible to fathom and it's frustrating. And so that's why I started sobbing like a child, like a toddler in those meetings with her. And maybe that's happened to you. Maybe as a person of color, maybe you've experienced that too. Or sometimes I think no matter what color a person is, sometimes men may have to deal with that too, where because the stereotype for men is that they are aggressive and mean and scary, and maybe sometimes they're treated that way by women. I don't know. So if you've had an experience like that, please share and if you found a way to overcome or work through those feelings of being so frustrated and hurt, how were you able to work through those feelings? I would love to hear that, and I think other people would too. And I think I'm looking at my notes because I have them right here. I think also, like in conclusion, a good way to deal with those feelings of being treated like a stereotype, and this is something I'm still working through, but I think a good way to deal with that is to find people who are not like that. Find other, possibly HSPs, um, or some really nice ENFJs, because ENFJs are awesome, um, who are very accepting and loving and warm, and surround yourself with people like that who build you up, because there's enough negativity in this world. And why should we put ourselves in constant contact with people who are only going to bring us down and make us feel worse? That can be, that is very bad for us psychologically and emotionally. So be around people who help us to see ourselves in the best way possible, so that we can treat other people in the best way possible. Because when you feel good about yourself, you try to make other people feel good about themselves, you know? So find your people. And also, I think it helps for us to educate ourselves, to learn more about what it means to be an INFP, what it means to be a highly sensitive person, and then use what we learn to share that with other people who may not know much about the Myers-Briggs personality types, or even about what a highly sensitive person is. Because when it comes to being an HSP, there's still a lot of beliefs out there that if a person is sensitive, that's a bad thing. That is not a bad thing. It's just a way of being. Just like I'm black. Some people, a lot of people think that's a bad thing, but it's not bad to be black. It's just a way to be, just like being a highly sensitive person is. So yeah, I think it really helps for us to find our people, to educate ourselves about who we are and what we bring to the table, as well as what some things we may need to work on are, and then to share that education to other people, with other people. I can't remember today. All right, well, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.